right. Okay, welcome everyone to today's webinar. For anybody that doesn't know, my name is Scott Goodfellow. I'm the CEO of Black 29. Black 29 is a company that owns a few different service companies in the real estate field now. We own Goodfellow Coaching and Consulting, as most of the people on here would know us as. We also own Black 29, the agency, which specializes in marketing and digital strategy, specifically in the real estate field and for agents and teams. And now, as many of you have seen, our recent acquisition of Pro REA Staffing. Not only is that a great addition to us because there's such a need in real estate teams today in not only finding people, but finding the right people. Because what we've noticed through the coaching is it's easy to hire people. As you know, a lot of time you can just post your ad on Indeed, you'll get a bunch of applicants, but then you finally say all the right things to you, but to finally get them in the door and get working for you, and it ultimately turns out it's the wrong person. We all know how frustrating that can be because you've spent all this time and money getting to that point. So we thought that was absolutely essential for our clients in order to add that service so that we can start getting them the right people and putting those right people in place, and hiring and training and retaining those people is of the utmost importance. Another great thing for this edition, it also allows us to have world-class recruiting talent provide a lot of great information, just like we're doing today for you guys. So without further ado, I'd like to present our first seminar, our first webinar on recruiting. And Vanessa, you can take it away.
Great, thank you. Welcome everybody. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Give me just a second. There we go. All right, so welcome, and I'm excited to share this information with you. Today we're talking about how to hire in today's competitive job market. And before we get started, I want to draw your attention to the chat box on the side of your screen and encourage you to tell us where you live and what position you think you'll hire for next. We're going to keep coming back to this as we go through this presentation, and I'm going to be asking you questions and looking for your feedback. So let's just get comfortable having that conversation right at the start, okay? So where do you work or where do you live, and what position do you think you'll hire for? And so the first thing I want to do is address who should be on this webinar. So this webinar, is for you if you are a realtor, broker, or a hiring manager for a real estate team, and you anticipate hiring administrative or management level staff in the next 12 months or so, and you've struggled to find the level of talent and experience that you want to hire for when you've hired in the past. So if that sounds like you, then congratulations, you are in the right spot. This is also the right webinar for you if you have lost staff to a competitor and you do not want that to happen again. So this webinar may not be for you if you are only interested in hiring or recruiting for salespeople. That's just a totally different process, and we're not going to talk about it today. So this is not the right webinar for you if you just want to hire salespeople. This is also not the right webinar if you're only interested in adapting your recruiting approach, if you're not interested in adapting your recruiting approach to the current market. And then finally, if you're happy with the quality and the quantity of the candidates who already apply to your positions, then congratulations, you do not need to be here. But for the rest of us, this graph will not surprise you. As I'm sure you're aware, we're at record low unemployment. We're at 4.1% in the US, 5.8% in Canada. And then look at the bottom of this graph. This is where it really gets dicey for us. For management, business, and operations positions, so in our world, that might be a sales manager or a director of operations, we're down to 1.9% unemployment. So basically, anyone you want to hire is currently employed, and your task is to entice them to leave their job and come and work for you. In our experience right now, about 80% of our candidates are currently employed, and the balance are either relocating or are going through a life change. And then out of our candidates who receive a job offer, more than half are in a multiple offer situation, meaning our client and someone not associated with Pro REA Staffing is also offering a job to that candidate. So it's a highly competitive market. And that brings us to our agenda today. So today we're talking about what the best practices are for attracting and retaining top talent. So first we'll talk about how to craft a job opportunity that attracts talent. Then we'll talk about how to retain that talent during your screening process so that they don't take another job before you're ready to hire them. And then finally, how to win when you're faced with a multiple offer situation. Now, there are a few things that we just won't have time to cover today, and those are salaries, interview questions, and how to find candidates. We won't talk about sourcing, for example, but I do have some resources that I can point you to. When we're finished with today's webinar, I encourage you to visit proreastaffing.com and go to our resources tab. And there you'll find some free guides to help you with some of these topics that we just can't cover on today's webinar. So I'd like to take a little quiz. What do you think is the #1 reason someone who is gainfully employed wakes up one day and decides today's the day I'm going to go out and look for a new job? What do you think prompts people to make that change? Is there anybody? I see Hema had a little trouble hearing. Has that been resolved? Can everyone else hear us? Terrible boss, Sarah says. Okay, great. So people can hear us. Yep, that is definitely one reason. Thanks, Sarah. That is definitely one of the reasons we hear, but there are really 3 main reasons why employees who are currently employed end up looking for a new opportunity. First, they don't like their boss. Second, they don't like their working conditions. And finally, they seek growth and they can't achieve that in their current job. So those are the reasons why these types of employees look for new work. And then money is secondary. Of course, money is part of the equation, but it's rarely the driving factor. I think we all know people who are in a job that they love with a boss that they love, and they're getting career satisfaction, and they could probably make more money somewhere else, but they're happy where they are. So this is essential for you to understand. This matters because when it comes time for you to write an offer to your ideal candidate, you need to understand what problem you're going to solve for them. So this is essential. Now, the first step in landing a great hire is marketing your opportunity. And you can't market anything until you can answer the question, why? So I'm going to pitch Simon Sinek here. I'm a huge Simon Sinek fan. And if you haven't read his book, Start With Why, I highly recommend it. The premise of his book is people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And while this is definitely true in sales, it is equally true in recruiting. People want to work with someone who aligns with their values and their vision. They want to get on board with someone who fuels their passion, who aligns with their values. So if you don't know why you do what you do and you don't know why your position is a fantastic opportunity, you can't expect to attract top talent. So when we work with a client, the first thing we do is go through a launch call. And while the focus of this call is on understanding the role that we need to fill, it's equally focused on who the client is and why their position is an incredible opportunity for the right person. And I find that a lot of real estate agents in particular struggle with this because for them, the idea of sitting in the office all day doing paperwork sounds like a terrible idea. That is not their idea of an ideal job. But you have to change your perspective because for someone else, that is the perfect job. That is what they're looking for, along with your culture and the other things that are going on in your environment. But think about the candidate experience just for a minute. Imagine you walk into an interview and you're sitting across from the person who is going to be your boss, and they're interviewing you and talking to you about a position, and they don't think highly of the position. Imagine how uninspired you're going to be to want to take that role. So it's really important that you change your perspective and you really look at what is amazing about your opportunity. So going back to the question I asked in the beginning about what job you think you'll hire for next, I want you to think about why it's a great opportunity for the right person. What is it that you offer that's unique or special that someone will connect with? As we move through this webinar today, I'm going to use a client of mine as an example, and she was gracious enough to give me her permission to name her. So thank you, Carrie. So Carrie is a realtor in the East Bay of San Francisco, and she's really unique. She does not fit the mold of a typical realtor. And in fact, her tagline is "not your average realtor." She lives an alternative lifestyle. She dresses in 1950s style clothing, and her group of friends and associates is really eclectic. They come from different alternative lifestyles, and they're from the LGBTQ community. And so when she came to us, she said, I really would like to find an assistant who either comes from my community or is really comfortable in my environment, because they're going to be interacting with my clients and I want everyone to feel comfortable. So we were excited about this because, I mean, let's face it, how often do we get to place someone with sleeve tattoos and purple hair streaks, right? Like that just doesn't happen in my world. So we were excited to find out what kind of candidates we would uncover for this client. So as we went through her launch call, we identified that definitely her company culture was a huge drawing point for this position. We also realized that she was a lot of fun. She was down to earth, she had a great sense of humor, and we could tell that working with her would be a lot of fun. We also identified that training and growth was really important to her, and she was willing to train someone from outside of the industry on real estate, and that was huge. And then finally, the reason the position was even open was because her current assistant had grown into a buyer's agent role on the team. And so she was open to promoting somebody either into a sales role or up into a management role on her team. So all of those things combined made her opportunity special and unique. And so that's where we started as we started to market her position. So once we have that in place, now we can define the job parameters. And when you're writing your job ad, I want you to think about this from the candidate's perspective. Long lists of job tasks are incredibly boring. Nobody wants to read that. What is more exciting and more interesting are areas of focus. So an area of focus might be, you will serve as the first point of contact for our clients and be our customer service concierge. So that encompasses a lot of tasks, and it gives someone an idea of what they'll be responsible for. Another one might be, you will design and manage systems for office productivity. Again, there are a lot of things that might fall underneath that, but that gives you an idea of what the job is, and there's some challenge and movement within that description. So once you understand your areas of focus, you can identify the necessary skills and experience required for the job. And this is where I need to challenge you to stretch a little bit. Because we're in such a tight job market, you might have to reach outside of your specific niche and consider candidates with slightly different backgrounds and experiences. Now, there are going to be things you just are not willing to train on, and that is fine. But I challenge you to think outside the box a little bit and consider areas where you are willing to give a little bit and willing to provide training. If you can broaden your candidate pool, you don't have to lower your quality standards. Next, you need to identify what your growth opportunities are for the role. Are you willing to consider someone who wants to go into sales or not? Either is fine, but you do need to know up front. The more clarity that you can create in this process, the faster you will reach your destination. When you don't have clarity, you don't have direction, and you waste a lot of time in this process. All right, so now we've identified why it's a great opportunity and what the job is, and now we can create our ideal candidate avatar. So what is this? Your ideal candidate avatar is like, imagine painting a picture of your perfect candidate. If you could have everything you wanted in one person, what would that look like? And we'll keep coming back to your avatar as we move through the search so that we can measure someone against your ideal candidate, knowing that we probably won't get every single thing. But for Carrie's position, we were looking for an executive assistant with at least 2 years of experience in administration or marketing. They would focus on general administration, developing and maintaining office systems, and customer service. So that's what the job is. It's essentially your 30-second elevator pitch if somebody came up to you and said, hey, I heard you're hiring. What are you looking for? This is what you could tell them. And then the next step is who. Who are you looking for? And your who should align with why your job is fantastic. So the same kind of language, the person who would be attracted to your why is who you're looking for. So in this case, we're looking for someone who was highly systematic, who sought growth, and they were accepting of people who are different from them. We also wanted someone with a great sense of humor and an eclectic personality, and they needed to have a direct communication style and be a leader in their role. So once we had that information, then we could go in and build her job ad. And whenever possible, we like to use our clients' branding, especially in a situation like this. This is Carrie's logo, because it spoke so clearly to who she was. And so in her position, we used her logo in the branding. Now, a couple just quick points on writing job ads, because I see a lot of terrible job ads out there. In fact, usually when a client calls me and says, I don't know, I had ads out, I'm not happy with who I'm getting, there's nobody out there, and we tweak their job ad, we suddenly get an influx of resumes. So the first thing you need to do is make sure that you don't bury the lead. That first paragraph in your job ad is essential. That's the only thing that shows up in search results on job boards. So put what the job is front and center. And then make sure to highlight why it's a great opportunity and talk about you. People want to know where their resume is going. So if it's not a confidential search, name yourself in your job ad. And then when you get down to the who section, who you're looking for, this is definitely an area where a lot of job ads need improvement. Nobody wants to read your 20-point list of everything you expect in a candidate, from excellent communication skills to perfect attention to detail. And trust me, nobody reads that and says, oh, I don't have good attention to detail, I'm not going to apply to this job. It just doesn't happen. So you're wasting valuable real estate when you do that. A better approach is to talk to your ideal candidate. Use the language you created in your who for your avatar and talk to that candidate. So in our example with Carrie, part of what we said was, you are fun and outgoing with a great sense of humor and an eclectic personality. You have a direct communication style, you get to the point, and you don't beat around the bush. So you can see how that would talk to the kind of person who would connect with Carrie. So just remember, before you post your job ad, to stand back and read it, make sure it makes sense, that it speaks to your target audience, keep it focused, engaging, and embrace what is challenging about the job and what is unique about you. So if you've done this correctly and you've put your job out on the right channels, you should have plenty of candidates. Currently, we get between 100 and 200 candidates per job posting. But I'm not going to sugarcoat it. 90% of those candidates are terrible. They're not qualified at all. So, just be prepared to read a lot of really bad resumes. However, if you've done this exercise correctly, the 10% who are qualified are going to be over the moon excited about your job. They are going to resonate with that job and they want to meet you, not just because the job is close to their house and it pays the right amount, but because of you and what you offer. This definitely happened with Carrie's job. I mean, even people who were really mainstream and could fit comfortably in any high-end real estate office, people connected with her why and the fact that she wanted to serve her community and help them buy and sell real estate. People really resonated with her inclusiveness. But I've had other clients. I had one client who loved Seinfeld, and she had a really dry, sarcastic sense of humor. And during our launch call, she said, I will only hire people who can quote Seinfeld. And we thought she was joking, because who says that, right? But she wasn't. She was completely serious. So we put a couple of famous Seinfeld quotes in her job posting, and we said, if you can't tell us who said these, then this isn't the right job for you. And people loved it. I mean, people were calling us. We got these amazing cover letters that people really took the time to express who they were because they connected with that. So you could think outside of the box, just let your personality shine through, and that way you stand above the noise of hundreds of generic job postings. So now you're finally ready to interview your candidates. And of course, we're not going to walk through the whole interview process. We'll save that for another day. But from a high level perspective, there are really three main objectives that you need to accomplish during your interview process. Obviously, the first is you need to verify that your candidate has the required skills, experience, and culture fit. But you also need to respect their time and move quickly and strategically through your process. This is something that we have toyed with and experimented with for years, and we feel like we've come up with a good balance. So with our clients, after the launch call, after we've screened, put out the resume, the job ad, we screen candidates through a two-part process. We first do an initial phone interview, And if we like the candidate, we do a 20-minute recorded video interview. And then if we still like them, we have them take the DISC behavioral assessment and write a brief essay. And that package of information is what is sent to our client. And then they decide if they want to meet with that person face-to-face. So for our client, so we may interview 10 or 20 people for the maybe 3 or 5 that our client will sit down with to go deep. So they have the time to really go deep with the candidates who are qualified for the role. So they'll do an hour to an hour and a half interview with their top 3 to 5 candidates, and then they'll have their top 1 or 2 candidates come back for a longer skill assessment interview. And I will do a full webinar on the skill assessment interview. This is so important, and it's such an easy step to miss because the resume looks great, they look great, they sound great. Okay, great, let's get this done and move forward. But you have to put the brakes on. I have seen it too many times where somebody said they were a transaction coordinator for XYZ team. They were there for 3 years. That team gave them a great recommendation. And then they moved down the street to another team, and that agent feels like the transaction coordinator has no idea what they're doing. So how does that happen? Well, they obviously have different approaches to the same process, but if the person who hired the transaction coordinator had sat down beforehand and validated that they did know what they said they knew, then they wouldn't have been surprised. So once you've assessed the skills that you expect, then with people who pass that assessment, you can go really deep into a conversation about standards and expectations, values and goals, and that's essential. So for the candidate who makes it all the way through our process with our clients, they're going to spend between 5 and 7 hours interviewing. And we feel like that's a pretty good number. You definitely need to see people on more than one occasion. You need to see them in different environments, and different people need to meet with them. All of that is valid and important, but you shouldn't drag it out much longer than that because you need to respect their time. So that's the first objective. You have to validate your candidate, but there's more to the process than that. You also need to secure your top candidates' buy-in. So interviewing is a two-way street. They're interviewing you and you're interviewing them. And there are some things that they need to know about you in order to keep them engaged in your process so that if another opportunity comes up while you're interviewing with them, they don't drop out of your process. The first is they want to know why you're passionate about what you do. Why should they get on this train with you and go into battle with you? Like, what are you all about? That's first. Second, they want to know how they fit into your vision for your company, and not just the role, but them specifically. Why are you excited about them? Why do you care about them? They need to know that early in your process. And then finally, they want to know how they will add value. Think about this from a candidate's perspective. They're currently employed. They're taking a risk if they leave that job and move to another. They want to know that they're going to be successful. So you need to be clear with them how they win with you. And so if you can help them understand these things early in your process, they will feel connected to you and to the job, and they'll stick with you through your process, even if it feels like it's taking a little bit longer than they would like. So the final thing you need to accomplish before you're ready to make an offer is you need to understand your top candidates' motives and expectations. So thinking back to that early slide when we talked about why employees change jobs, by the time you're ready to make an offer, you should have a clear understanding of what problem you can solve for your candidate and why they're interested in working for you. Is it better hours? Is it a more reasonable boss? Is it training and growth? You need to have an answer to this question. So for Carrie, her top candidate's name was Cassie, or is Cassie, and she was a professional copywriter, and she wanted to build her career in real estate. She was looking for training and growth. That's what was most important to her. And by knowing this, we were able to help Carrie put together an offer letter that spoke to her wants and desires. So at this point, you have verified skills, you have checked references, you've had a deep conversation about standards and expectations and goals and vision. And so to get to this point when you're ready to make an offer, only to find out that you are not the only person vying for this candidate can be pretty disheartening. And trust me, I've been there plenty of times, I get it. So I want you to think about this process the same way you do when you have a buyer entering a multiple offer situation for a house. When you're in that situation, how do you respond? You write a clear, simple, no surprises offer, you keep it uncomplicated, and you put your best foot forward. The same thing applies here. So one of the resources that I mentioned on my website is our salary survey. So I highly recommend that you download this. This is a list of every position we've placed in the past year and a half. It's divided by region, and it lists the job title, the base salary, and the bonus structure. So if you're not sure what the going rate is in your area for your job, you definitely need to check that out. But you should also, by this point, have a really good idea of what your candidate is expecting in a salary. You don't want any surprises at this point. So competitive base is key. And then we strongly recommend that for these types of positions, the bonus should not equal more than 30% of their total compensation. The reason for this is that these candidates seek security. They're not salespeople. And the more risk built into their job, their compensation package, the higher chance you have that they will move on to another job when things slow down for you. You should also base your bonus on a measurable result. Year-end bonuses or bonuses based on your perceived performance of the candidate mean nothing. They add no value. Base your bonuses on something that can be measured, that is objective, and that will create value for the assistant. So bonuses can be based on all kinds of things. I mean, obviously basing it on number of transactions is really common. Same thing with sales volume, but I've seen bonuses based on number of 5-star Zillow reviews and number of likes on Facebook and completing certain projects that were essential for the job. So you can base the bonus on anything as long as it's measurable and realistic. And this is part of the process that we go through with our clients. We help them craft these job offers. Now, we couldn't move past this page if we didn't talk about health insurance. So I would say about 50% of our offers include health insurance. And I'm curious for the people on the call, how many people here offer health insurance for your assistants or for your employees? Is anybody? Yeah, it's not that common, which is why if you do it, you really stand out. So if it's something you can build into your process, I highly recommend it. So if you've gotten this far and then you realize that you need to sweeten the pot, maybe now you know there's another offer on the table and you have to figure out how to make this a more attractive offer without breaking the bank. The things that make the most difference for these types of high-level candidates are training and work-life balance or flexibility. If you can factor either of those into your offer, you really have a leg up. For Carrie's position, she was able to offer health insurance, and then she also invested in a 90-day real estate assistant training and coaching program through a fantastic coach that I introduced her to. And that made a huge difference for Cassie. She really wanted to know that she'd be successful in the job, and knowing that her boss was willing to invest in her made a really big difference. So at the end of the day, when we presented this offer to Cassie, she had 3 offers in front of her, 1 from us and then 2 from other companies that we weren't involved with. And, it was a nail biter, which please take this job. And even though the other 2 offers had higher base salaries, Cassie decided to work with Carrie. And the reason that she gave was connection. She felt connected to Carrie. And I think we can all relate to this. We want to work with people that we like. I mean, that's fundamental. And so when you can build connection through these deeper conversations with your candidate, that matters at the end of the day, even if you can't offer the highest salary. The other things that really mattered for Cassie, and we see this all the time, hours and benefits are really key. The office culture and the agent's reputation in their market. I cannot stress that enough. Everybody talks, everybody knows who's who and who's difficult. Your reputation matters and it impacts who will work for you. And then finally, opportunities for growth. If one position, even if the salaries are the same, but one position promises more growth, chances are that's the position a candidate will take. So it's been about a year since Cassie and Carrie started working together, and they're doing fantastic. The team has doubled. They have 2 more buyer's agents. Revenue is way up, and Cassie is moved from being an executive assistant to a director of operations. And in fact, if you want to hear more about her experience growing in this role, I interviewed her about a month ago. And if you look on our YouTube channel, you look for True Story of a New Real Estate Assistant's First Year. That's my interview with Cassie. All right, you guys, so we have taken all the way through this process. So we've talked about how to craft an opportunity that top talent will want to apply for. We've talked about retaining that talent during the interview process. And then finally, how to win in a multiple offer situation. So what I want to know is, for this next position that you're going to hire for, what are you going to do differently? What did you take away from today's webinar that you can apply to your next search? Well, you guys, that wraps it up. If there are any other questions, I'm happy to answer them now. And if you are interested in learning more about our services or having a free consultation to discuss your search, you can go to proreastaffing.com, go to contact us, and you can schedule a free consultation directly with me. And I look forward to speaking with you. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day.